Before we start this video, a few things. If you have not checked out the video that I uploaded before this one, I would really appreciate it if you go give it a watch. It's one of my favorite that I've made in a while, and it unfortunately was probably a little too late. Uploaded it on Thursday, and it was about All-Star Weekend, so probably should have got that one out sooner to get the more instant views, but it unfortunately is lacking in the view department, so if you could go check it out, I'd really appreciate that. If you like to hear me rant, which I'm going to be doing in this video, there's a rant in that video about dunk contest judges because the way they were judging that dunk contest was really pissing me off. So if that intrigues you, go give it a watch. Also, go check out my podcast called The Hoops Cast. The first link in the description is always going to be my podcast, the most recent episode. There's a new episode that's going to come out soon. It's one of our best ones of our now 20 episodes. Me and Mojo picked our all-time teams, but with a twist that made it pretty interesting. And then we compared the two and had a judge come in and determine which team was better. So when that comes out, I want you guys to be there to listen to it because it was a good one. But with that all out of the way, today we're going to be talking about the Bulls again. Specifically, the front office. Recently, with All-Star Weekend being hosted in Chicago, the national media finally put some focus on the disaster that is happening in Chicago with the Bulls, and because of that, there's been some heat brought on the front office and the ownership and all of that has not been there, because despite the Bulls being, I think, the third highest valued franchise in the NBA, the mainstream NBA media pays very little attention to this team. But the All-Star Weekend has brought some attention, and that has brought some pressure. And because of that, the Bulls have finally made some kind of a change, and that was to demote Gar Forman again, which they've done before. Unfortunately, I am seeing a lot of Bulls fans celebrating this like it's a victory. The reason I say again is because Gar was demoted before a while ago, to where his voice is now very minimal in the Bulls front office anyways. After he decided to make one of the worst trades of the season that had happened, which was to trade Taj Gibson, Doug McDermott, and a second-round pick for Cameron Payne. After he made that move, he lost a lot of his respect and power within the front office, and he got demoted to having very little influence on the front office, and now just being a scout for the most part. And now after that demotion, he is exclusively a scout. After that Cameron Payne trade happened, the decision making from the front office generally got better. I didn't disagree with any front office move decision from the Jimmy Butler trade onwards, outside of giving Cristiano Felicio $8 million a year for 3 seasons. Other than that, trading Jimmy Butler, getting Levine on a bargain contract, trading for Otto Porter Jr., drafting Wendell Carter, the only issue that I have taken since that move was hiring Jim Boylen and drafting Kobe White. The last one was not a big complaint because I wasn't sure who I wanted at that pick, and I don't know what I would have done in the position they were in. Probably would have drafted Cam Reddish, who is probably going to end up being a better player and a better fit for this Bulls team, but whatever. I'm not going to knock them too much because they did need a point guard. I also was somewhat okay with Jim Boylen still being here, simply because after a very rocky start where the Bulls basically mutinied because of how much they hated the guy. In February, after trading for Otto Porter, Jim Boylen made some adjustments, and the Bulls played the best that they had in 2 years outside of that one run with Nikola Mirotic. With those adjustments, the Bulls were 500 in February. Zach LaVine and Larry Markkinen both had the best months of their career. So did Otto Porter, who averaged 19 points a game for that brief stretch, and the Bulls looked like a future playoff team. My main basis in thinking that this Bulls team could be a playoff team was that month of February last year, because they showed what I believe to be a flash into the future. And because of that month, I was okay with Boylen. Wasn't particularly excited about him. I didn't think he was a good coach, but I thought he could be passable. But I've obviously changed my mind quite significantly since then, and that is obviously because Jim Boylen is a fucking idiot. See, a flaw in my mindset when showing some level of support for the Bulls front office was assuming that Gar Forman was what was holding them back. But really, it was always John Paxson, because Paxson was, and is still now, the leading man. Any move that Gar Forman came up with, that trade for Cameron Payne, for example, had to be approved by John Paxson in order for it to be done. So while yes, Gar Forman is the man who formulated the Cameron Payne trade, John Paxson looked at that and said, yeah, that looks good to me, and fucking pulled the trigger. It has always been Paxson. The thing is, now that Gar has been demoted to just scouting, I don't want him fired because he's always been more focused on scouting than anything else. And the one thing that this team has been good at in the past, ever since they've been hired, is drafting. They even got a big steal in this year's draft with Daniel Gafford, who has been amazing. He's a perfect run, jump, and dunk athlete center who's exactly who you want off of the bench when you have a more nuanced center in Wendell Carter. So when he's on the bench, you can get that energy guy in there, and that's perfect. That's exactly what this team needed. Even though Kobe White has been bad so far, he's shown some flashes of being at the very least a damn good six-man down the line. But John Paxson is the one who had the idea to hire Jim Boylen in the first place, and even worse, he's the one who decided to extend him without even bothering to look for other coaches. And he's the one who still has not fired the guy. Jim Boylen is the worst coach in basketball, but at a certain point, I can't even be that mad at him anymore because he's just a symptom of the problem. He is a yes man for John Paxson. Even the coaching decisions this guy makes, half of the time, I think it's something that John Paxson told him to do so that he could keep his job. He is a straight up yes man. Nothing more. He's dumb, but nothing more than that. There have been rumors recently that the Bulls wanted to hire the GM of the Indiana Pacers, Chad Buchanan, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, who orchestrated the Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis for Paul George trade, the TJ Warren Steele trade where they literally got him for just cash, and the Malcolm Brogdon signing, which was also a big deal. So he's clearly pretty good at his job. The problem with that, however, is that if you are going to be joining the Bulls front office, you're going to have to be a yes man to Paxson or you won't be there for all too long. Chad won't come here and fire Boylen like any smart GM would because he won't be given that authority. If he has some really good trade idea in mind, if John Paxson doesn't like it, it's not going to happen. See, you might be like, oh, why would he disapprove of a good trade? Well, he approved of the Cameron Payne trade, so clearly he doesn't fucking know what's going on either. So please, Bulls fans, do not celebrate Gar Forman being demoted, or at the very least, do not make the mistake of assuming that that is the solution, because at the very best, this made the Bulls front office 5% better. That is it. Don't make the mistake that I did and just settle for this bullshit. It isn't anything really that consequential. Until John Paxson is gone, it is likely that Jim Boylen is not going to go anywhere, and thus nothing changes, at least it doesn't change for the better. Things can definitely get worse, I promise you they will. There's already rumors of Zach LaVine wanting to ask for a trade, but they're definitely not going to get better. It's a damn shame, because I've said this before, this roster is not bad. I'm sure some clown in the comments section is going to say otherwise, and I'm also sure I'm going to get some comments that are saying, oh, stop talking about the Bulls. Fuck you, it's my YouTube channel, I'll talk about whatever I want to. Alright, so leave those comments to yourself. But Lauri Markkanen last year averaged 19 and 9, Wendell this year has anchored this mediocre defensive roster to a top 5 defense in the league when he has played. LaVine is one of the 15 best scorers in the NBA at the minimum. I'd probably put him in the top 10. He's nowhere close to a top 10 player because everything outside of his offense is bad, but his actual scoring ability is pretty damn great. Like, I don't think it gets a whole lot better than what he's at right now. Otto Porter Jr. is one of the best 3-and-D players in the league. Thomas Satoransky is a solid point guard. Nothing special, but a solid playmaker. He can shoot the three. He's tall, so he can play multiple positions, and he can attack the basket. Thad Young is one of the most well-respected veterans in the NBA. Good defensive player, can also play a little bit of offense. Daniel Gafford is a good backup center as a rookie. Chris Dunn is a phenomenal defender. Up until the past few games, he was leading the league in steals despite playing 20 minutes a game. This roster with someone even semi-competent in charge would be in the playoff picture in the Eastern Conference. Take a free agent center like Dave Yeager, the guy who turned the Kings around last year and was stupidly fired. If the Bulls had Dave Yeager at the helm of the Bulls coaching and John Paxson was able to have no influence on how he did his job, this team would be in the playoffs. Call me biased, I don't give a shit. This roster is good enough to be a playoff team in the Eastern Conference. Western Conference, no. But East, definitely. But unfortunately, because of the guys who are in charge, this team is never going to be good. As I was going to say, not even going to be great, but it's never even going to be good. And that's a damn shame because it has the pieces to be a pretty solid NBA team. And it's an even bigger shame because one of the great things that John Paxson did do was get Zach LaVine on a bargain of a contract. He only makes $20 million this year and he only makes $40 million over the next 2 years. But that bargain contract is going to go to waste with him making terrible decisions and keeping this team from being at least a halfway decent team. One of the things that I think MDJ pointed out in a video of his was that low value contracts, or I guess high value contracts, basically guys who are making way less than they are worth, have a pretty big impact on success in the league. The Bulls have one of those, and they're not making the best of it. I don't have the solution here other than firing these guys. People are going to say, oh, well, what about the ownership? And yes, Jerry Reinsdorf is a bad owner. However, just because there are teams with bad owners that are still at least somewhat successful. There can be teams where their owner only cares about profit and their team is still successful, because caring about profit still means caring in some regard. I don't think it's as much on Reinsdorf as it is on John Paxson, although Reinsdorf is the one who needs to fire John Paxson, because having this many yes men with one guy making all the decisions, with the franchise going nowhere in 2 decades now, I think it's time for a change. I don't even need Gar Forman gone. Just fire John Paxson, please. That's the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.